Gloriously wired. When it rains, it pours. Heather, mother. My mother is a warrior. She grew up with her adoptive parents and adopted brother. She studied at IU, then ran off to New Mexico for a teaching job. She met my biological father, Ray, who was the love of her life. Unfortunately, he was also the scum of the desert and abused drugs and abused my mother. My mom left the fucker shortly after she had me, and then she moved back to Indiana to touch base with her family. I was 1 at the time, and my mother was adjusting to being back in her hometown with her abrasive mother. One day, her father went to the store to get milk for me and died of a heart attack while driving. Now, adjusting to the new divorce, relocation, an infant, and her father's death, my mother soldiered on. She met up with a guy named Jeff, who she had known as the dreamy senior in high school. Jeff and my mom decided to marry, and 3 years later, Jeff adopted me. I was a junior in high school, 17 at the time, spending most of my time in the pool training for swim competitions. One day after practice, Mom called and asked me to come home as soon as possible. I instantly had a flashback to when I was 12, and my mother made me go home to tell me she was pregnant. However, this time was different. This time, Mom really did have cancer. Mom sat me down on the edge of her bed, just her and I, and told me that she had cancer. With tears in her eyes and almost visible fear in her heart, my mother was embarking on yet another challenge in which she would remain a warrior. After a complicated pregnancy, a breast reduction, filing for bankruptcy, and going through gastric bypass surgery, my warrior mother was now facing a whole new beast, a beast we all fear. Soon after her diagnosis, the doctors decided it would be best for Mom to have a full hysterectomy. Mom went through the surgery, and the doctors declared remission. Unfortunately, this incredible news was somewhat stifled when Mom started experiencing recovery complications. Mom grew a hernia the size of a fucking basketball. In light of its impressive size, Mom named her new mutant growth Harriet. Harriet took Mom back under the knife, where most of the complications were finally resolved. During Mom's stretches of recovery, she was heavily medicated to reduce the pain. Mom was prescribed Vicodin for months until the prescription became a dependency, and the dependency became a new beast. As our family began noticing the problems, Mom decided to go to a pain management doctor. The fuckers put Mom on a drug called Suboxone to slowly reduce her dependency on Vicodin. This new drug made Mom a zombie. After overcoming all of these incredible feats, Mom was bound by the wrath of this horrific drug. One evening I came home from swim practice to find my mom drooling on herself. She was sitting upright, but in a frightening slouch with her chin teetering on her chest. She was on the nod and unresponsive because of this new drug. Seeing my mom incredibly empty, bound and controlled by something that was supposed to help her, sent me out of control. I finally broke down and experienced the weight of the past 2 years, from the day of diagnosis to now. I was crushed. I felt homesick in my own home. I was the only one who knew my mom, who knew how my mom was a true warrior. I saw my mom there with drool coming out of her unconscious body. I saw my warrior and my rock defeated. The rage and fright this sent me into was an out-of-body experience. I fled the house and called my best friend, who rushed over. When he arrived, my knuckles were bloodied and I had gravel buried under the skin of my hands. I remained in the gravel driveway, bathing in blood, sweat, snot, and tears for hours. When I recovered myself, I returned to the house, where I saw the most inspiring person in my life, still nodding on the couch in a state of absolute defeat. To highlight my truth in the genuine past, I look back at my journal entries dating back to 2011, July 14th, 2011. Basically, since the day my mom told me she was diagnosed with cancer today, I have grown immensely. She was diagnosed February of 2010, so I guess I've been on this 17-month learning, growing, emotional experience. Lately, it's all come down to this one and only quote that I will live by now. You are your problem, and you are your solution. I have to stop blaming the world for things. When it comes to problems that are more than easy to blame the world for, like money, health problems, friends, family, and arguments, I have truly begun attacking things with a positive outlook. The current clusterfuck going on falls under the category of family, relationships, money, and health problems. First, I'll take it back to cancer. It wasn't the diagnosis that crushed Mom's spirit. It was the continuous surgeries and conflicts with doctors and medicine. I think the hardest thing in the world for me is seeing people I love completely lost or in a bad place. Now that Mom has passed her drug addiction, I'm so proud of her and all that she's gone through. Of course, she has her ups, but she's mainly temporarily lost her way. She'll get it back, but for now it's like everyone is against her, or so she feels. I think Dad wants to see her as her normal self, as she was before all of this health shit went down. Not to mention, we recently filed Chapter 13 bankruptcy, leaving me to pay for 100% of my expenses, and they borrowed $2,000 of my earnings. This didn't stop for quite some time. In fact, it continued for years. The drugs continued and actually varied and multiplied. Mom once told me that the drugs were so powerful that she went to work and fell asleep on the toilet for 3 hours. She literally had to be woken up from a bathroom break. Eventually, this unfortunate influence depleted Mom's impeccable reputation as the head guidance counselor of a vocational school. Mom was known for her undying passion for helping students. She changed and in fact saved the lives of many young students. Despite Mom's dedication to her students, the drugs and lethargy from the weight of the past few years became too much of a burden at work. Mom was laid off by her best friend and left jobless. When it rains, it pours. However, this tragedy came back as a blessing in disguise. My mom, the soldier, decided to take a year off, withdraw her retirement fund, and explore the world. My mother came out to Australia to visit me 3 times during that year. She reinvigorated my life. By showing me how much she could overcome. My mother's visits further instilled my most beloved philosophy that we live in a place so gloriously wired. The most amazing thing about all of this and all of the trials of life is that she has and remains an inspiration to so many people. She has excited the lives of so many people by guiding humans through their own hells, caring with more care, and loving with more love than anyone else I've known. Her love has extended beyond the treacherous moments of her life and has made me who I am today. My mother is a part of who I am, and my mother is a part of where I'm from.
Birth story, life and death. Lauren, sister. While standing in the kitchen, Mom and Dad said they had something to tell me. I asked if Mom had cancer, and they both responded with something worse. My 40-year-old mother blurted that she was pregnant. I remember running to my room, slamming my door, and blacking out. 2 weeks went by, and I was still a sobbing mess. I remember begging my mom to get an abortion. I literally pleaded on my knees for her to kill the fetus. When they got to the hospital, Mom told me that she walked into the waiting room to check in, and in a matter of moments, Mom had placental eruption in the waiting room. Mom was bleeding profusely and was rushed to the emergency room for an emergency C-section. My mom had a second eruption. She recalls seeing the floor of the emergency room covered in pools of crimson. She remembers the doctors telling her to stay with them. While Mom was bleeding out, she recalls thinking that she had to keep the promise she made to me time and time again, the promise that she wouldn't die. She remembers feeling like she wanted to fall asleep and that the blood loss kept her faint and weak. But this promise kept her alive. The next morning was my first day of middle school. I got in the shower, blissfully ignorant to the happenings of the night. My grandmother came into the bathroom and told me that Lauren, my new baby sister, was born at 2 a.m. I think I nearly cried with joy. I went from hating my fetus to loving the idea of this new human that I would forever be related to. After finishing my first day of 6th grade, I went up to the hospital where Mom was in a recovery and Lauren was struggling for her life in an incubator. With collapsed lungs and a weak body, the little pickle of a human fought and survived in her incubator. After 2 weeks, we got to bring her home, which marked the beginning of a beautiful shift in our lives. Now, 10 years later, Lauren has changed my life in so many wonderful ways. I am incredibly thankful for my mother's strength and for Lauren's strength. I cannot image my life without this beautiful little girl. Lauren, my beautiful little sister, has helped shape who I am today as an adult. My sister is part of who I am, and she is part of where I am from.
Tying the love knot. Paul, partner. After my insane lesbian housemates turned out to be conspiracy theorists and acid heads, and after I made the decision to drop out of school, Paul's house was the only place I could go. I think when the shit hit the fan and flew all over the fucking place, it was truly a blessing in disguise. Over the next 4 months, I got to know Paul. I got to know his dearest friends, his dreaded acquaintances, and his lovely colleagues. I got to learn his fears, listen to his life mistakes, walking through his insecurities, and best of all, I got to witness his moments of humiliation and strides of triumph. While I was enjoying looking into Paul's kaleidoscope of beautiful friends, Shakespeare nerdisms, bouts of anxiety, and all the other bright geometries of his life, I slowly began sculpting moments with Paul and recklessly throwing them into my own kaleidoscope. Without this budding and flourishing relationship, I don't think I would have survived much longer in Sydney. Returning to Sydney was probably the most difficult life decision I've made to date. I had left my mother back home while she continued to battle and overcome years of medical trauma, prescription addiction and job loss. Being so close with my mum growing up made leaving her side almost impossible. I also left my little sister at home. I left her with an irritable father and my unhinged mother. She was left to her own disorientated devices at the age of 7. The whole time I was attempting to broaden my horizons by travelling and working abroad, I was experiencing dread and regret. Regret that I left my mother and sister, and dread that our distance would forever change our relationships. I regretted not being a good big brother, and I especially regretted leaving my mother back home to battle things on her own. Fortunately, Paul's companionship shined light on my debilitating regrets and enlivened my life day by day with love and care. Paul saw me through my decision to drop out of school and supported my plans to work and travel. Paul moved house for me while I was being deported to New Zealand. Paul bought a car with me so I would have means to take a job I was incredibly passionate about. Paul made me organic smoothies to combat my anxieties after nights of binge drinking and snorting cocaine. Paul let me cry and emote my tragic disposition when 2 close friends passed away. Paul put up with my promiscuity during my debauched drug-induced nights at the Sydney gay clubs. Paul also connected with my mother when she visited 3 times in 1 year. Paul grew inseparably close with my mother. Through all of his undying support and almost uncomfortably huge amounts of love, Paul diluted my sadness, my regrets, my fears and my future dreads, and strengthened everything in my life that needed strength. Paul taught me love and empathy, and he taught me what living in the present moment really feels like. Like Paul once said, I am the emperor of empath. That's what allows me to love and live. The beauty of this is that Paul also let me teach him how to take chances, flee the scene, explore the dark avenues to find newness and adventure. After nearly 2 years together, loving, learning, recovering, growing, tasting, dancing, losing, winning, and evolving, my work visa ended and I was forced to leave the country again. This time I decided to return to home to mend my own relationships and to be closer to my family. In moving, Paul decided to sacrifice his world for me, something I think we both taught each other: sacrifice. Upon my return to Indiana, Paul was granted a prestigious scholarship to work with a program called Shakespeare Behind Bars in the US, so he decided to leave his job security as well as his family and home. Between saving the world and traveling the States, Paul has spent the majority of his time here with my family and I. The past year has been a culmination of rebuilding my relationship with my mother and sister and growing even more with Paul. Paul's intrinsic and rare ability to uplift people with love and support has mended many sorrows and tied many love knots. My partner is part of who I am, and he is part of where I am from.
Well, for me, at first, I kind of felt like I was reading somebody else's story, and then, because I'm not really a crier, I mean, I feel things strongly, but I'm not really a crier, and it kind of caught me off guard when it got really super emotional.
Me too. Same deal. There was, I think the ones I appreciated the most was like the honesty about the imperfections in a relationship, or trials and tribulations, not just the romantic stuff, but actually knowing that all of it's part of the fabric.
Well, our relationship was perfect.
As was. Hell yeah, it was. So perfect. Same with the house.
I think it was just really cool to actually hear my story, because I didn't know that what happened.
Like you hear
I
bits
just
and pieces.
I
but-
hear little things about it, but I didn't know like the full story.
Yeah, to read all of that in, like, I went outside and I said to like relive the last 7 years in a few minutes is kind of overwhelming, because you kind of you don't forget, but you put stuff
Just
out
don't
of your
think about
head,
it.
and so yeah. I am a warrior.
Sure you are.
You missed a couple surgeries in there, but other than that.
Incomplete. No, not that I didn't agree with, but just different perspectives. Like I was like, oh, that's what you were thinking at that point. Oh, that's great to know.
I think for me, there was one kind of good thing that maybe my perception has been that you have been like maybe angry and more bitter towards me about things than what that story indicated. And maybe it's because time's gone by and you've worked through stuff too, but I mean, I guess that made it harder and easier to take, that, you know, you accepted everything and can respect it instead of just be pissed.
Wow. My favorite. What I learn about the world from it, and what I learn about myself. Like when I read a story, even if it's far removed from who I am, what it reflects in me. I mean, that's why I do what I do, and it's like a mirror up to nature.
I think, well, like I said, you know, the story encompassed so much in a long period of time, and through storytelling you can relive things, both good and bad, and every time, probably every time I would read it, it would be a different experience. And so, I mean, maybe that's the beauty of storytelling. It's storytelling or reading a story, you, like, every time you find something new and learn something new, think about something differently.
Yeah.
Because even though it doesn't change, it's always changing.
And especially like reading your, you know, the journal entry sections in your narrative, seeing even in that how your narrative has shifted since then, and that reality is no longer the case, but there's still parts of it that are very much part of who you are, but you're also grown and moved on.
Can I say something that I wish you would have put in it? How whenever I was in the incubator, I took out my breathing tubes by myself.
Been feisty ever since.
Also a warrior. It's a bit soppy, but thanks for making me feel like I'm part of this narrative now. I feel really hooked up in it.
I was really kind of
Don't
dreading
cry.
the experience, but it, I don't know, it's kind of, in just a few short 30 minutes this morning, it's kind of been, I mean, a good, fun, in a weird sort of way experience. Yeah, kind of bonding, kind of, yeah.
I thought it would make me cry, but it didn't.
Did it make you smile?
Yes, I laughed whenever Jesse said that Daddy was drunk and he had to come home and get coffee so he would stay awake and be able to drive you to the hospital.
Yeah. I wasn't laughing that night, trust me.
Funny for him, not for you.